Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to tune in to our China and Hong Kong in market webinar. Some of you may have registered separately for our Hong Kong webinar, which was initially promoted and scheduled to be held on Tuesday, 19th of May. So a reminder that this China webinar has been combined with the Hong Kong into this one session. So please don't try to log on in Tuesday. I'm Ashley Ridley from State Promotions, Department for Trade and Investment, and I'm your host for today. Welcome to our final session for Series 3. It's a little bit exciting today as potentially we could hit our 1,000th attendee across our 3 sessions. So, or our 3 series, I should say. So it's a little bit exciting. We're really rapt that we've had so many attendees attend and join in on these presentations and gain so much insight from our expert in market reps. Today, we are joined by our South Australian in-market representatives, Xiaoya Wei, our China Country Director, Javen Li, the Senior Business Development Manager in Shanghai, Alice Jim, Senior Business Development Manager for Hong Kong, Macau and South China, and a guest presenter from Austrade, Rhett Miller, who's the Trade Commissioner, North Asia for Education. Xiaoya will provide a brief general update on China. Javen will provide a bit of a focused update on the international education sector. So today is a little more focused on the international education. Alice will also provide a bit of a general update on Hong Kong and the education sector, and then Rhett, of course, will also present on the China education area as well as some key initiatives in that space. So allowing time for questions, all up, this webinar should run for the maximum time of 45 minutes. So please stay on. It's always interesting and insightful that the presenters will share with you. So before I hand over, as always, just like to share a few logistical items. The session's being recorded. You can always access these recordings on our website. At any time during the webinar, you can ask questions or provide feedback through the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen. Please ensure your questions directed to all panelists rather than to specifically one, as this ensures we can see your questions or comments. If we do run out of time, we'll include any unanswered questions and the answers onto our website, and I'll also make a point to follow up with you directly and connect you to the most appropriate departmental representative. And lastly, we will have a 10-second poll pop up at the end of the webinar, so do take the time to complete this for us to continually improve our communications to you. There's also a comment field there. If you raise any questions or you'd like some follow-up actions, pop in some information there, and again, I'll follow up with you directly and connect you to the appropriate person. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Xiaoya Wei, South Australia's Country Director for China. Good morning, Xiaoya.
Good morning, Ash, and thank you for the introduction. And thank you all for your time today. This is the 3rd webinar for China, and I'll update you the latest China market situation, which including the COVID-19 latest update, China economy, logistics, consumer behavior change, and what you need to know for China now. So let's take a look about the latest COVID-19 situation. In recent days, we still saw re-emerge cases. For example, Wuhan, the epicenter of COVID-19 outbreak in China, plans to test its entire 11 million population after new infections appeared more than a month after the city ended a lockdown on 8th April. And also the widespread COVID-19 testing said to become the new normal in China. As such, large-scale, efficient testing has been proven to be a key to controlling the rampant spread of coronavirus in the global war against the pandemic. However, a number of positive developments over the past couple of weeks reinforcing China as one of the most, if not the most, promising market in this year. For example, China has reopened cinemas, hotels, sports venues, and even Disneyland, albeit the social distancing rules and reduced capacity. And Shanghai Disneyland reopened its gates on Monday, becoming the first Walt Disney theme park worldwide to welcome guests again following novel coronavirus-related disclosure. Let's take a look at the economy side. First point to make is that China's economy is substantially back to work. According to the National Development of Reform Commission, virtually all large manufacturing businesses are up and running at around 95% capacity, with 84% of smaller businesses have reopened. But there are questions around whether the remaining firms, particularly those SMEs that haven't restarted yet, will actually open at all. The small business sector has been among the hardest hit during the crisis, particularly across hospitality, travel, and to a lesser extent, property and retail. The government here in China has been actively promoting revenge spending by Chinese consumers, pushing them to take out their frustrations at being locked up for weeks on end in a bizarre consumption. But household incomes and wealth are depressed, which is damping demand. Retail sales fell another 15.8% in March after a 20.5% decline in the first 2 months of the year. Saying all of that, all of which paints a picture of a long, slow recovery, not so much V-shaped or even U-shaped, but as bathtub-shaped. So let's take a look at logistics. Ports are pretty much back to normal operations now. Latest reports suggest that all major ports in China are achieving 90% of the average throughput of the same period of last year. The fact that volumes are slightly lower than last year is possibly an indicator of softer demand, as much as residual supply-side issues. With that said, we are yet to see the full impact on port logistics globally as COVID-19 spreads around the world. And as with all these things, global logistics that will take a hold to wash through the system. And for cargo flights, we saw an up more than 25% year on year at the moment, at all-time highs, but it's not enough to make up for the loss of belly freight, with total air freight in March down by 23% year by year. The additional challenges here is also cost. Recent reports we've seen suggest that per kilo prices are varying between 3 or 5 times as much as normal, and sometimes considerably higher than that. Australia, of course, has a higher reliance on passenger aircraft freight than most of its fresh produce, especially seafood, fresh dairy, some horticulture, and a small amount of chilled meat. That's the principal reason why the federal government introduced the International Freight Assistance Mechanism. I know you may all aware of the program and how it's operating, or if you need further information, please don't hesitate to contact our onshore or offshore colleagues. We are more than happy to support. And so let's take a look at the Chinese consumer behavior. Chinese consumers are continuing to embrace new e-commerce, with renewed passion. E-commerce platforms are reporting behavioral and demographic shifts. During Spring Festival, daily usage of e-commerce platforms grew 56% week. 2 weeks later, it was up a further 96%. Consumers, especially the young, are becoming more prudent and health conscious. China's affluent younger generation had never experienced a domestic economic downturn prior to COVID-19. The virus has forced them to think harder about spending, saving, and trade-offs in purchasing behavior, which consumers seeking better quality and healthier options. And there's also a trend for live streaming. Like, for example, Taobao's live streaming sales during International Women's Day raised more than 250%, while at the same time, the platform had 1 million new merchants join in February. Here, we want to say that social media and e-commerce in China will be crucial tools for our Australia's recovery in a post-COVID China market. Of course, due in part to the increased shift of Chinese consumers online and also to their potential amplification of branding and distribution. And finally, I just want to share there are several facts that you need to know across some of our key export sectors. For example, a number of factors are driving demand for plant-based meat in the post-COVID world of China. And from the wine perspective, Wine Australia released its 2020 Q1 report, revealing that which showed a 7% declining in exports to China year on year. Wine merchants in China, what they are doing now, they are looking at innovative ways to boost the sales, including hosting virtual tastings on Douyin and several social platforms. And the e-commerce in infant formula trade has boomed in recent months as Daigou trade. This channel has become impossible with travel restrictions in force. Also, the research by Meat and Livestock Australia on the impact of COVID-19 on Chinese consumers points to sustained opportunities for high-value Australian red meat exports to China. That is positive. And the demand is slowly returning for premium seafood, but it remains patchy and prices are still below pre-COVID-19 levels. With a large number of patients now re-engaging the hospital system for non-urgent and elevate surgeries, industry sources predict significant strains on the system. This will continue to drive demand for quality clinical services, training and accreditation services, and digital health solutions, including from Australia. In technology, too, the increase in digital gaming and video sharing platforms has been pronounced and presents some substantial opportunities for Australian tech companies. So, well, that's all of my part today for China overview. Thank you all for your time. Well, today's main topic is about education. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Javen, to share with you about the education part. We can still connect during the Q&A session, and if you want to contact us, you can either reach our onshore and offshore. Thank you all, and over to you, Javen.
Thank you, Xiaoya. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Glad to be here today. As you have just heard from Xiaoya, China continue to recover for economic activity. So how about education? In the next few moments, I will give you a quick update on how the Chinese domestic education system is recovering and what are the implications on Chinese overseas students since the COVID-19 outbreak. Also, I will share with you some in-market insights on international education during this pandemic. Next, yep. Education providers, both public, private, from kindergartens up to universities, were required by the Chinese government to delay the recommencement plan of the spring semester on campus. The guidance from the Chinese Ministry of Education is that even though offline face-to-face classes were disrupted, the learning for students should continue undisrupted at home. So obviously, online classes became an alternative way of education delivery, which has been a significant test on how quickly online education could be deployed and adapted, given that the unprecedented large scale of Chinese students involved. It is reported that 265 million students in China switched to online classes during the pandemic. I thought it would be interesting to show you some pictures on the slide for instance, primary school students were required to follow the schedule provided by their teachers to complete both academic and physical exercise tasks, just the same as if they were on campus. As the virus has been largely contained and starting to subside, with ongoing strict monitoring measures in place, offline classes have gradually resumed. Obviously, China has many provinces and regions, and each of those regions has a different level of virus impact. Therefore, it is impossible for the Chinese Ministry of Education to set a specific reopening day for the education sector. So for low risk and less densely populated regions, offline classes were resumed in as early as March. However, for large city, first and second tier cities with a large population, for instance, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, offline classes were resumed in the last week of April, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The Chinese Education Ministry held a press conference this Tuesday, and it was mentioned that nearly 40% of Chinese students have returned to campus as of 11th of May. 40% is the equivalent of over 100 million students. So how the campus reopen plan works in China is that, for instance, in Shanghai, there are 3 key dates announced by the local education commissions so far for students to return to campus in different phases based upon their year of study. So, for instance, on the April 27th, the final year students in middle school, high school were the first batch to return to campus, given that they have key entrance exam in July. So on that day, around 150,000 students returned to campus in Shanghai. Universities were advised to start working on plans for their final year student to return from April 27 onwards as well. I will talk a little bit more about the higher education resumption later. The rest of the students have resumed after the Labor Day holiday on May 6th, or will return to campus on May 18, which is next Monday. Kindergarten and special education remain largely closed. This is because of the vulnerability of this demographic. We have heard that some kindergartens have opened in low-risk regions, but it is still up to the parents' discretion to decide whether to send their children back to kindergarten or not. Also, after-school tutoring center and language training centers are not allowed to reopen before the full operation of kindergarten and primary school. As you might have heard, the university entrance exam Gaokao has been postponed by a month from June to July, and it is reported that this year 10.7 million Chinese students will be sitting in this exam. So it's a very important exam here in China. Obviously, English proficiency tests have been cancelled for May. These include TOEFL, IELTS, GRE, and GMAT. Those who register for an exam in May will be refunded. The importance of ensuring a smooth and safe campus return for staff and students, it is obviously high on the Chinese Education Authority's agenda. The phased return approach that I just mentioned allow Chinese education officials to cautiously monitor and also improve their risk mitigation plans. Before any education provider reopens, it is mandatory to have an emergency plan in place for approval, which must include all of the measures that are listed on the slide. The local education authority will also inspect campuses to ensure the approved plan is fully implemented. I touched upon the higher education sector resumption earlier. Obviously, online classes will continue for the foreseeable future for the tertiary education students. In China this year, there are 33.7 million tertiary education students in China. And out of that, almost 9 million students need to travel outside their home provinces to return to campus, and also 20 million to travel within their home provinces between cities. So the latest data shows that around 2.9 million students have returned to campus. that means about 10% of the total higher education students have returned. So obviously, cross-region travel is a major concern. However, for instance, shared student accommodation, large scale of classes, and also a crowded canteen are also additional sources of concern for the Chinese Education Authority. Therefore, most students are still waiting for approval from their university to return to campus. It is likely that most university students who are not graduating this year or conducting key research assignment will not need to return until the new semester begins, which will be around September to October. There are also stringent requirements for university students before and after returning to campus by their university officials and local education officials as well. According to the joint press conference led by the Chinese Foreign Ministry and Chinese Education Ministry, it was reported that 1.4 Chinese students remain overseas. China has 1.6 Chinese overseas students in total. So that means only 200,000 Chinese overseas students returned home during the pandemic. The advice to the Chinese student overseas from Education Authority, in line with the World Health Organization, was do not travel unless absolutely necessary. All foreign entry into Australia was banned on March 20. And according to the data provided by the Department of Home Affairs, currently, as of 5th of May, we can see that there are still 37% of Chinese student visa holders who enroll in South Australian education institutions remain outside Australia. I think the latest data has come out this Monday as well. So, but there is not much difference because the border of Australia is still closed anyway. Although there are some important considerations for interpreting this data, this provides some insights on the impact of travel restriction on the number of Chinese students in South Australia and Australia. When Australia imposed a direct travel ban on China in early February, many Chinese students were panicking about not being able to return to Australia to start the new semester. Some of them have flown to third country in groups, such as Thailand, for a 2-week quarantine period in order to get back into Australia. As COVID started to spread around the world in the US and UK, Chinese overseas students have shared their experience on making a difficult decision and also the complicated planning about a long journey back to China on social media, for instance, on Douyin, which is TikTok in Australia. This will concern students and parents regarding having international travel again in the short term, and also not to mention the limited flight tickets available. Between early February to 20th of March, it is estimated that around 10% of Chinese students have returned to Australia via a third country. Similar to domestic Chinese students, Chinese overseas students obviously studying online, everything have moved online. The students have started to accept this new normal approach of content delivery, obviously after some reluctance at the early stage. As we know, face-to-face classes are still preferred. I thought it would be interesting to share some insight that we collected here on the ground for your preparation to recover the sector. Obviously, South Australia's international education sector was valued at 1.92 billion last year, which has overtaken wine, become the #1 sector in terms of export income to South Australia. To build a recovery plan with actions to address the challenges, it is important to understand what matters the most to the Chinese students and parents. In April, we noticed that the British Council ran a survey among over 10,000 Chinese students who are planning to study overseas. Health, well-being, and safety is the top priority. Also, finance. Finance is a concern, but less so than having a welcoming and safe environment to stay for the study. However, as the economic implication from COVID unfold, it is expected that financial worries will intensify over the coming months. In this survey, interestingly, but also unsurprisingly, 60% of Chinese students surveyed flagged that they would choose to stay in China if they were to make plans. Some of the agents that we have informally spoken to mentioned that South Australia is in a good position to retain a student pipeline, given that the fatality and infection rate of COVID are significantly lower than other major overseas study destinations, for instance, in the US, in the UK, as you can see on the graph on the slide. However, observations from the past pandemic, for instance, the SARS outbreak in 2002 and 2003, the Chinese outbound student number, the curve tend to stay flat with weak growth for a number of years. So it is important to look at a similar situation, how the sector rebound. We should also expect the rise of financial uncertainty in the near future. So this will have an impact on household consumption as well. So the trend that we have witnessed in the past, in a few years ago, about sending Chinese students at a very early stage to study overseas might experience a decline. Obviously, this is a very expenditure for the household consumption. Chinese graduate unemployment has started to dominate news headlines already. A common saying in China is that graduation equals unemployment. The Economist Intelligence Unit estimated that the urban unemployment rate will reach 10% this year in China. I was reading the news and it was reported that in Australia in April, the youth unemployment rate is about 14 to 15%. Anyway, so this year there will be 8.7 million Chinese graduates entering the job market. So whether overseas qualification and experience will give students an edge in the cutthroat China job market will be a priority in deciding studying overseas or choosing a field of study. Agents are still conducting student recruitment online, digitally. This new way of student recruitment also create mixed feelings from university reps and also students. Just as online education application in China, some feel that it is as almost effective as offline if interaction can be improved. Some mention that this digital approach has started to diminish return on students' interest and attention. Luckily, Chinese State Council, which is the Chinese cabinet, has announced that last Friday that a necessary conference and trade fair can be organized. So hopefully more agents will start to plan this sort of offline recruitment events in coming months. So running out of time, to wrap up, I'd like to share a story that went viral on Chinese social media a few days ago. As you can see on the photos, a family is selling food in a local bustling market to help ends meet. And underneath the store, their daughter is studying online. This demonstrated that education is and will continue to be a top priority to Chinese family and will continue to take up a significant portions of their household expenditure. Obviously, there is no easy fix on recovery, but education is probably one of the most resilient sector in China, and is widely agreed that good education will pay good dividends in the future. That's enough for me. I'd like to hand this over to my colleague, Alice in Hong Kong, to give you an update in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Javen, and good morning, everyone in South Australia. My name is Alice. I'm based in Hong Kong. I'm just going to give a very quick overview of the situation in Hong Kong, followed by some focuses on the education sector. As of yesterday, in Hong Kong, we have 1,051 confirmed cases with 4 fatalities and 95% recovery. After 3 weeks of 0 local cases, we had just had one local cases a few days ago. So the situation in Hong Kong appears to be getting more stable. We have started to relax some of the measures, including social distancing and border control gradually. But it's too early to talk about lifting them all. Some of the key measures that have been relaxed in the past weeks, including new quarantine exemptions for students and businessmen traveling frequently between Hong Kong and Guangdong. Public gatherings has increased from 4 to 8. Catering premises increased to 8 people per table. Bars and pubs have reopened. Schools are reopening from the 27th of May, and public servants and services have returned to working in the office from the 4th of May, which is pretty much the same for all of other private enterprises. So a few latest economic indicators. The first quarter, the GDP has contracted to almost 9%, unemployment rate increased to 4.2%, and tourist arrival has continued to plunge to 81% year-on-year in the first quarter. On the retail sales, supermarket sectors continues to do exceptionally well, and total value of restaurant receipt has decreased to 32% in the first quarter. However, since the public group gathering and catering premises measures have relaxed last week, we have seen a slight rebound in business in shops and restaurant business over the past weekend. The second quarter outlook is still pessimistic because the trade depends on the demands of the US and Europe, which is still very weak due to the pandemic development. We are still facing some issues with violent acts, the political unrest in Hong Kong. For example, over the past few weeks, protests and conflicts have reappeared, disrupting the operations of the retail sector. But we are looking better in the Q3. The government believes if we continue out our efforts in fighting against the virus and continue to resume economic and commercial activities, things will get better in the third quarter this year. Let's look at some consumer behavior. The global market research firm Ipsos had conducted a consumer survey surveying 1,000 Hong Kong adults in March this year. The Hong Kongers are spending more time and money online to buy necessities. Some findings include over 50% are spending more on browsing online shopping platforms. Over a third have purchased groceries online or used mobile payments methods to avoid unnecessary contact with other people. We've seen 20% have used extra time at home to do more e-learning and e-courses. Only 6% feel they haven't made any significant changes in their daily life. And which categories are gaining more interest and why via which channels? Obviously, household cleaning products are still in great demands. 27% have spent buying more online, followed by frozen foods, of which 19% are buying more online, and fresh fruit, and 9% of consumers are buying more online. The demand is also great for health supplements and also hand cream moisturizers. The main online shopping channels still include Hong Kong TV Mall, Parking Shop, Welcome. Other popular ones include Eon and EZ Store. This chart is an interesting chart because the pandemic is having a serious impact on global FMCG markets and e-commerce retail, among other economic sectors. From this chart, you can actually see several consumer product categories which have seen significant online median price fluctuation. including bleach, rice, liquid soap, were affected among the most among the selected FMCG categories. The next slide. In this chart, you can actually see the number of consumers who purchased food, beverages, grocery online early this year has increased 23% to 730,000 from a year ago. In terms of new dining habits, of course, people have been working from home and they've been calling for meals. So the food delivery platforms such as Deliveroo, Foodpanda, and Uber Eats all report a surge in orders, and we have seen many more eateries signing up, including top-notch restaurants. How about the financial impact for Hong Kong consumers? It's interesting to see 41% still believe the pandemic will not have any major impact on their income. A third expects income will be reduced at some point, and a third are already earning less money. The locals are becoming more cautious in investing, and also many are keeping cash in their hands. On the food and beverages sector, what's new here? The good news is, as I mentioned before, the restaurant and premises have relaxed and increased 8 people per table, and bars and pubs have reopened, so this is good news. However, we are continuing seeing huge disruptions in the air logistics, which have translated in prices for consumer, especially the fresh categories. But it's good to see we are seeing more flights flying in from Australia with the support of the IFAM program. We believe these home dining habits will continue post-pandemic to a certain degree. Therefore, we're seeing more of social media and TV platforms much utilized. For example, we're seeing more cooking tutorials, including those from master chefs or celebrity chefs in Hong Kong. And we're seeing TV channels introducing those shopping channels, similar to the ones you all see in Australia after midnight. As I mentioned before, the home dining mode, there's still increased interest in the retail packaged products, including bare essentials, healthy functionals, frozen, more durable foods, and also in meal boosting products and supplements. So there's actually opportunities for your business or for us as a government to consider hosting some virtual food showcase for Australian premium produce, given though the travel ban is still in place for a while. In the wine sector, we haven't seen much new updates since my last sharing. We're still seeing wine merchants are still busy moving the stock that was piled up for food services and corporate customers to private customers. So there has been a lot of wine educators and wine merchants hosting virtual wine tastings, food and wine pairing dinner, master classes, and wine chess. Some of them are packaged into a wine pack. Some of them are free online sessions. So please work with your wine distributors in the market to highlight your brand. Some of the key upcoming trade shows to note: the Vin Expo in Hong Kong has further postponed from July this year to February next year. We haven't seen much changes in the high techs, so we continue to see the rise of adopting digital transformation across robotic, data analytics, AI, VI, fintech, e-wallets, digital health, and telemedicine. I wouldn't talk too much about this today. So lastly, I would like to talk more on the education. Hong Kong remains the 5th source of international education for South Australia, and is a very important market for higher education, vocational education trainings and schools, and is relatively smaller markets for elite course and non-award programs. As of the 5th of May, according to the Department of Home Affairs, South Australia has 31,000 international students still in South Australia physically across all education subsectors. Of those, 7,000 of them remain offshore in the home countries and continue to study online from there. And on the Hong Kong side, currently we have almost 1,700 Hong Kong students enrolled in South Australia, and 16% of them are outside South Australia in Hong Kong. Majority of them in the school sectors, VET, and also higher educations. We are very pleased to see Hong Kong schools are reopening after 3 months of closures. Secondary school Form 3 to Form 5 will resume on the 27th of May. Primary school 4 to 6 resume on the 8th of June. Primary 1 and 3rd grade students and 3rd year of kindergarten resume on the 15th of June. However, the 1st and 2nd year grade of kindergarten will not return to school in the whole of this year. Let's look at more closely in the different subsectors of the education. For higher education, the Hong Kong University Admission Exam, Hong Kong DSE, will finish approximately by the 25th of May, and the result announcement are expected in late July this year. This year, we have 50,000 DSE students this year. International exams such as IB and A-level were cancelled, and this has created concerns on new admissions requirements. However, this has not created much impact for Australia higher education sector, as Hong Kong students can use their Hong Kong DSE result to apply. Most universities in Hong Kong will continue to conduct online lessons until the current semester ends in May. Alternative forms of assessments, such as online exams, will be carried out at the end of the semester. So for Australia institutions, higher education student recruitment would be best for the February 2021 intake. For the school sectors, for those international students or Hong Kong students who are still stuck in Hong Kong, they are very eager to return back to their overseas country to continue face-to-face on-campus studies. Because not many schools are providing quality online learning, or the students from the school sectors do prefer face-to-face studies. For the non-award and foundation programs, as the next intake would commence September to November this year, so there'll be some huge impact if the Australian border has not lifted by then. Early course sector. Hong Kong is not early course sector market. However, as the early course is a pathway, student tours and preschool, there's a huge impact because of the travel ban. And in terms of what sort of education activities happening in Hong Kong, we are seeing a lot of overseas, including Australian institutions, hosting webinars, online classes, demos, and virtual tours, and working closely with the agents to promote them. However, I've been speaking to a few agents, and the comments is they do not think they are very effective because, and there's a very low conversion rate because there's no face-to-face contact and no face-to-face interview. Study Adelaide is also introducing online open day and demo classes. I understand there's one starting next week in the mainland China. We have seen agents and foreign institutions joining hands to host virtual student recruitment fair as well. For those who are fairs who are 100% virtual, the feedback from the agents are not very effective or preferred. As I mentioned before, because there's a very low conversion rate, there's no face-to-face interaction and no face-to-face interviews. And I understand there's a few agents are organizing semi-virtual student recruitment fair in June and July, where they bring all the students in. Hopefully the public gathering measures will be relaxed by then, and they'll be bringing all the students physically in one place and inviting all the international institutions to interact with the students via digital means. Some of the key concerns from the parents, students, and agents in Hong Kong, including the main concern is when is the Australian border reopening? And also they're hoping the Australian institutions and government will provide international students with quarantine support. For example, putting boarding school and for some quarantine centers at schools for the international students. In particular for E11 students, for those who are stuck overseas, they're very eager to come back for on-campus studies. Parents' concern including safety, discrimination, and well-being for the kids. What about student abroad? What are the studying abroad preference? For English-speaking countries, pre-pandemic, Australia are still UK are still on the top preference for studying abroad for Hong Kong students, followed by US, Canada, and New Zealand. However, currently we're hearing Australia is more popular than UK, which is great news. Because we have not had any major outbreak in Australia, and thanks to our Australian government's strong response to combat COVID-19. And also South Australia is also in a very good position for its great response and preventive measures. So in brief, there's actually a higher preference for study abroad. Lastly, the key competitors, for example, UK Trade and Investment Body, they are hosting many virtual education futures mini conference that includes panels, plenary, and also breakout sections online. However, they are in more unconcerned situation because the new semester will be commencing in September. So lastly, for the education institution like yourself, similar to other sectors, please remain close communications to your in-market education agents and stakeholders and decide what's best for you in terms of promotion activities now and going forward. And please provide relevant support to the local partners. And it's time for Australia to obtain more market shares in terms of studying abroad. And lastly, please continue to reach out to us at the South Australian Department of Trade and Investment onshore, and also to us in the offshore offices. So that's my sharing of today. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. That was fabulous. We've had some really good presentations so far, but before we head over to Rhett Miller for his presentation from Austrade, I just want to apologise to all our participants. I did say this would run for around 45 minutes. It looks like we are going to go over, so please stay online and hear from Rhett and allow some time for some Q&A. If you do need to go, submit a question or some feedback into the box to the right-hand side of your screen, and we're happy to touch base with you directly, so you have that alternative option. Otherwise, allow me to introduce you to Rhett Miller, the Trade Commissioner for North Asia for Education. Hi, Rhett.
Hi, Ashley. Look, thank you very much for that. Now, folks, as Ashley mentioned, we are running very short of time. So what I am going to try and do is be very short and sharp so that there is time for questions for those of you who decide to stay on. So just some key points in terms of where we're at with the China market, expanding on what Javen mentioned earlier. So 39% of all Chinese student visa holders still outside Australia, just a little higher than the 37% relevant to South Australia. Online adoption across the market since the border closure on February 1st has been extremely rapid and very impressive. You've seen, for example, some large-scale institutions like the University of Sydney by March having over 1,000 programs online, ANU by March having 700 programs online. And we've been helped in terms of online delivery into China by recognition by the China Service Centre for Scholarly Exchange, which recognises foreign qualifications in the China market, recognising all qualifications that are undertaken during the COVID-19 period online as being valid. We are still trying to get a determination from the CSCSE as to recognition of future qualifications where we've got future commencing students, and the CSCSE has indicated to us that they will be monitoring the situation in different markets to determine that the regulations that they have in place are appropriate to cater for all students impacted by COVID-19. In saying that, the attitude to online study remains mixed. Some of you would have seen a survey that was recently conducted by IDP of some 6,900 applicants intending to study at a range of major destinations. 38% of those applicants surveyed indicated that they would prefer to defer entry to study face-to-face rather than study online. However, there was one bright spot in the research for us, which showed that Australia had the lowest percentage of applicants who were choosing to defer. Agent feedback from the market, as you would have expected, and following on from Javen's comments, inquiry numbers have dropped, safety, of course, being a prime concern. And we're seeing that also in data regarding the trend towards local bilingual schools. Also, there's been an increased interest in taking up a place to sit the delayed Gaokao on July the 7th and 8th, which suggests a trend towards more domestic market choices at that higher education level. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the China market, in the short term, I want us to focus on three key things. So first of all, in regard to that perception around online, there is a need to boost that perception in the market. Austrade has two initiatives that it's currently running in that space. The first being our Study with Australia campaign, which is focused on a series of taster programs delivered online by key Australian universities on the FutureLearn platform. The second campaign that's currently being rolled out at the moment. The second campaign that we will be rolling out next month is our hashtag in this together, 同舟共济 China Online Study video campaign, which is a series of testimonials of Chinese and Australian students talking about their experiences studying online to give a real peer review of those experiences for the market. And we're partnering together with DESI on that campaign, and it will roll out from next month right through to July in the lead up to semester 2 to boost enrolment in semester 2 programs. Next, there's a real need to reinforce positive messaging around the Australia-China education relationship. Javen alluded to some concerns about incidents that have taken place in the market here, and obviously that's not the story of Australia. We are a welcoming, multicultural destination that has a wonderful reputation for hosting international students and tourists alike. So we need to reinforce messaging around this through that hashtag in this together campaign. And I would encourage you, where you're putting out positive messages on WeChat or Weibo, to use those hashtags that are indicated there so we can continue to socialize that message. Finally, there's a real window of opportunity for all of us, particularly vis-a-vis US and UK and some European competitors as we head into 2021. Javen spoke about safety being a prime concern, and Australia and New Zealand's reputation really as the COVID-19 safe house will serve us extremely well going forward. And so that has to be a big part of our brand messaging in the coming months. We have to do that carefully and in a nuanced way. It's just got to be about our own achievements, not about comparison. But that will be something that Chinese parents will pay attention to going forward. So thinking about that in your branding messaging will also be important. If we roll on to the next slide, please. So you can see here an outline of our recovery plan. I won't go over all of this, just highlight some of the key things you might want to be involved in. I've mentioned our In This Together campaign, Study with Australia campaign. Rolling on to September, October 2020, we have our nation brand education messaging being rolled out in the China market, which will include that COVID-19 Safe House message, and that's being rolled out as part of Festival of Australia. So we're certainly keen for South Australia to be part of that. In November, we will be holding our Austrade Australia-China Education Business Planning Summit, where in the past we have also had all states and territories represented, and that'll be a chance for us to commit to our market recovery plan going into 2021, and we'd welcome South Australia to be a part of that also. Looking ahead to March, there'll once again be the China International Education Exhibition and Tour, the CIET, where again, nation brand will be leveraged, hopefully with an Australian pavilion, should a physical version of that event occur. And that attracts a lot of national and media attention, and we want state and territory involvement, including South Australia, in that particular event. And finally, looking all the way to November 2021, we will have our postponed Austrade Desi EdTech Education Showcase, which aligns with the Global EdTech Conference in Beijing, and we would be very keen for South Australian providers to join that particular activity. If I can just finish as we roll on to the next slide with a reminder that for all providers in Australia, there's free access to our Study Australia Resource Hub, which contains toolkits for online education delivery in China, so a referral list of platforms you can use. Also, a virtual recruitment toolkit to help with recruiting online as we continue along in this space. We've got some updates and information for agents and providers on there, as well as collateral for that In This Together call to action that I referred to earlier. So we'll just go to the final slide. So a reminder to all of you, never let a good crisis go to waste. From crisis comes opportunity. And myself at Austrade, working together with Xiaoya, Javen and Alice, look forward to working with you going forward. Let's open it up to questions for those who are still on the line.
And we do certainly have quite a number still online, so that's great. Thank you so much for staying with us. There's been some really valuable and fantastic insights on the current situation, particularly involving the international education sector. It's certainly been one that's been of high interest to our attendees previously. So I'm not going to take up any more time. We've already received a few questions. If we don't get to them all, please know that we will be in touch with you directly offline. So Michelle Brown has come through with a couple of questions actually. So we'll start with this. It is around the education. I'll just throw them out there, and whoever feels that they're most appropriate to answer, I'll leave it with you. How are education agents engaging with potential students? What marketing channels are being used, and what types of content is trending?
I'm happy to take that one, Ashley. So thank you, Michelle, for what is an extremely good question. So in terms of I think the rapid response that occurred with the education sector in Australia of putting curriculum content online, so too there was a rapid response with agents in China. And they switched over very quickly to virtual recruitment events, and we're getting very substantial audiences with respect to those virtual recruitment events and presentations that are delivered at those events. We had the Study Australia presentation. I think it's been delivered now at over 20 different virtual agent events. And we have had at some of those audiences of over 100,000, which gives you an idea of the level of engagement that's going on. Agents continue to leverage content through their usual channels, so through Weibo, through WeChat, and they are promoting the fact that many Australian institutions, like other institutions in other markets, are delivering programs online and still open for enrolment going into semester 2.
Great, thank you, Rhett. There's been two questions. I might try and wrap them up into one. How does Australia rate as a destination compared to other traditional destinations for international students? And to flow on from that, wellbeing and safety is a major consideration to Chinese students and parents. Does this mean that South Australia has an advantage in attracting more students from China?
Well, I'm happy to take that one as well. Look, that's a very, very interesting question, I think, at this juncture. So Australia, as you probably know, in terms of the marketplace, has traditionally ranked third vis-a-vis the US and UK. However, in saying that, I think with respect to COVID-19 and that safety aspect that I spoke about earlier, it will be very interesting to see what happens with student flows going into next year, and the degree of popularity, I think, of Australia and New Zealand as destinations. I think crystal ball gazing in this environment is a very dangerous business, so I certainly won't be hedging any bets on as to what the numbers may be, but certainly I think that there will be increased popularity due to that reputation as a COVID-19 safe house. And yes, when it comes to South Australia, if you push that message, that will help you. So please incorporate that, I think, into your branding. And I know South Australia has not just a reputation in Australia, but globally for being incredibly proactive with testing and their response to COVID-19, meaning the impact has been really mitigated.
Fantastic, thank you, Rhett. And finally, a last international education question. So if any opportunities for last minute questions, please submit them. Otherwise, this is our final question. Do you think in-country delivery will be preferred by Chinese students and by parents?
I think in-country delivery, I think Rhett has just mentioned in his PowerPoint, I think institutional partnership are of interest to both Chinese and also Australian institutions. So previously we have seen 2+2, 3+1. Now we have 4+0, like this sort of TNE models delivering. So I think also this in-country delivery will be another source of diversification for student recruitment for the South Australian institution, in addition to agents partnership. So institution partnership is in a more sustainable, stable way, and we have seen that this is also I think we will continue to see more opportunity in this space for in-country delivery in China. Yeah.
And for Hong Kong, I would say the TNU will continue as well, given though we have this Australian Safe COVID-19 Safe House benefits right now. So and also it's important TNA is also an important pathway for Hong Kong students to gain more higher education or postgraduate degrees in Australia and South Australia. And we are seeing more R&D commercialization between the different universities in Australia and Hong Kong as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to our panel. It's been great having you today. We'll wrap it up here. I'm really mindful of the time. So thanks, viewers, for staying on. We'll pop up our online poll now, if you don't mind taking the time just to complete that. Submit some feedback, submit some further questions. If you need someone to reach out to you, this is your opportunity. We're here to help. Thanks, Xiaoya, Javen, Alice and Rhett. We do appreciate the amount of time and effort you put into these sessions. So a huge thanks to you all. I keep saying it time and time again, we talk to each other across government, particularly Austrade, our partners in crime at the moment. We have them all on here all the time. We have excellent locally based staff, fellow departmental colleagues such as our international market teams, our sector focused teams and our trade start advisors. So reach out if you need some support or assistance. We're here to help. Keep an eye on your mailbox for details in Series 4 of our global in-market webinars. Also head to our website because it's High Tech Month at the moment. We've got some really awesome activities planned and in place at the moment. So head to the website, have a look at what's on offer and attend those if you can. And of course, all of our webinars are recorded and are on our website for you to view. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great day, everyone. Xiaoya, Alex, Javen, and Rhett, thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.